Welcome to the basics video, where I will go over the basics of the phone that the average person will care about. This video is for the Huawei Nexus 6P. The Huawei made Nexus 6P has a 12.3 megapixel back camera along with an 8 megapixel front camera. The camera is fine for me, but I have some complaints. The image quality comes out clean, but most of the image is lost once zoomed in. Low light images come out very well, which really surprised me. A little grainy, but that's pretty normal, even for newer phones. The camera is capable of 4K, but only at 30 frames per second, along with 1080p and 720 at the same frame rate. This camera is proof that more megapixels does not mean the picture will be better, but in 2017 the camera is still above average. The recording options do affect the score for the camera, but it will receive an 8 out of 10. The operating system is as close to stock Android as you can get, because it is. This is Android 8.0, which gives you a decent amount of customization. There aren't any fancy gimmicks, just stuff that actually helps. Except for one, but it helps out sometimes. There really isn't much to it if you've used an Android before with Nougat, but the notification shade has slightly changed, along with the ways the notifications can be displayed. This version does add picture-in-picture and more emojis, and that seems to be about it. There are many visual differences, and this update is mainly behind the scenes. If you like all the extra stuff, this may not be the phone you're looking for, but it will definitely run smoother than most phones with the Snapdragon 810 processor. The last thing is that this phone does not support nightlight, which is introduced into Android 7.1. Not a big deal, but it is odd to see that this phone does not support that stock Android feature. The software is pretty simple to understand and is nice because there is no bloat, so I will give this category an 8 out of 10. Regarding the battery, it's actually really good. This 3450 mAh battery is huge, but it has issues. Overall, I think that this is one of the best batteries in a phone that I've used so far. The battery is a couple years old, but I was still able to squeeze out almost 11 hours of the battery with 44% left, and 2 hours of that was with the screen on. Another day I got almost 14.5 hours with 31% remaining, and 2 hours of that was the screen on. Another day, I squeezed 12 hours and 42 minutes with 27% remaining, and 2.5 of those hours were screen on time. All of these figures are with the brightness all the way up. The phone does support fast charging, but whether it is Qualcomm Quick Charge 2.0 is a little confusing. It charges up from 20% to 100% in less than 2 hours, but that's with the original charger. I charge my phone at night and never needed to charge the phone in the middle of the day, so that should tell you something. Unfortunately, you can't change the battery manually, and it will require a third party, Huawei or Google, to replace the battery. Although, I wish you luck with having the manufacturer replace the battery. You can also replace the battery yourself, but you run the risk of breaking the camera glass. I had no issues with the battery and did not have range anxiety, so I will give it a 9 out of 10. Here's where it gets confusing. What phone should I compare this to? For this case, I'm going to compare it to the Nexus 6. It is hard to compare these phones because they are made by different companies for Google. Motorola makes the Nexus 6 and Huawei makes the Nexus 6P, and there are some major differences. The Nexus 6P is thinner when talking about the thickness and the width. The 6P is also slightly lighter, weighing about 5 grams less. The back is not as round as the Nexus 6, but it doesn't make the phone uncomfortable. However, I do believe it is easier to hold the Nexus 6 when compared to the Nexus 6P. The charging port has moved from the upside down micro USB plug to a universal USB-C plug. The camera has been downgraded from a 13 megapixel sensor to a 12.3 megapixel sensor, which isn't a big deal, but the Nexus 6P lost optical image stabilization and gained laser autofocus. The front camera has been upgraded from a 2 megapixel sensor to an 8 megapixel unit, and it is very obvious. Both phones have 3 microphones, but the 6P has 2 on the front now. The reason for this may be to help with better voice recognition when using text-to-speech or saying, "Okay, Google." Oops. With the addition of the metal back on the Nexus 6P, the wireless charging had to be removed, which the Nexus 4, 5, and 6 all had. The battery has been upgraded from a 3220 mAh battery in the Nexus 6 to a 3450 mAh battery in the Nexus 6P, which helps the Snapdragon 810 processor out. Which reminds me, the processor has been upgraded from a quad-core Snapdragon 805 processor in the Nexus 6 to an octa-core Snapdragon 810 version 2.1 processor in the Nexus 6P. Geekbench shows a 23% performance increase and a 30% GPU increase, which isn't too bad. The RAM and the storage is the same on the 6 and the 6P, with the 6P having an option for a 128GB model. They both lack external memory, but at least they both have headset jacks. The Nexus 6P screen is 5.7 inches, making it 0.26 inches smaller than the Nexus 6. But the Nexus 6P screen is brighter, so I would choose that over the two. While the Nexus 6 maxes out at Android 7.1.1, the Nexus 6P is able to go to Android 8.0 and is assumed to receive more updates. Lastly, the Nexus 6P has a fingerprint scanner, while the 6 does not support such deal-breaking technology. There are some benefits and only a few downsides, but the Nexus 6P will get an 8.5 out of 10 in this category. The only thing really missing is about 1/4 of an inch of a screen, wireless charging, and optical image stabilization. Okay, maybe those are important, but still. In the specs video, I told you that this phone has Gorilla Glass, but it doesn't mean that it is indestructible. The front is Gorilla Glass 4, but it doesn't matter too much. My phone has been used a decent amount and the scratches tell the story. I have replaced a few of these screens before, so they do break. The AMOLED display makes it even more fragile when compared to an LCD display. The front screen will cost you about $200 to fix or $130 to do it yourself. The camera lens will run roughly $65 to fix or $9 to do it yourself. The back panel will run you about $65 to $85 or $30 to do it yourself. The aluminum frame is nice, but major damage to the corners will cause premature breaking of the front glass or the camera lens. The charging port can be replaced without soldering and will run about $15 or $65 to $85 for someone to do it for you. The batteries go bad and are one of the main reasons for boot loop issues and will run you about $15 to do it yourself or $65 to $85 for a store to do it for you. It may be difficult to find an OEM battery, but do you really want OEM? The battery that failed was OEM, so buy from whoever you want. The Nexus 6P has a very expensive screen, even 2 years later, but the other parts are fairly cheap, so this will get an 8 out of 10. Now, should you buy this phone? With a score of 83%, I believe that you should buy this phone if you're still interested. The fingerprint scanner is on the back, and it allows us to have front-facing speakers, which is normally pretty awesome. In my case, they aren't too loud, but mine may be going out soon. The back camera glass is a little outrageous, but it looks nice. I feel like the phone still needs a case, but it can take a beating for sure. This is not a one-handed phone, but if you like big phones with big screens, you shouldn't have an issue with this. I hope you learned something from these videos, but now I want to learn something from you. What would you change on this phone? Let me know in the comment section below or on Twitter at MattofRWR. Thanks for watching.